given the choice, I think most of us would prefer a life that was smooth sailing, easy going. Every day you wake up, man, everything just falls right in place, and it always works out perfectly. Or would you rather have a life that was just filled with difficulties and was a problem every day, and every day you woke up and you had no idea what today's problems were going to be? I think given that choice, even if I don't know you, I think I know your choice on that one, right? That most of us would prefer to have a life that is smooth and easy and, everything just falls into place. But we don't get to make that choice, right? Life doesn't give us a choice. In life, sometimes things go smooth. Other times things are challenging and kind of hard to figure out, and you don't know what to do. But the reality is that when things are going perfectly, when everything's going just like you like it, how motivated are any of us to do anything different? When everything goes smooth and easy, we're not really feeling called to action. It's the challenges in our life, the obstacles we deal with. Those are the things that cause us to adjust. And it's often those experiences that actually move us to do things that really start to make a difference. Because if you think about it, think of the people you know, the most interesting people you know. Might be somebody you know personally, might be someone who's famous. And the people that you know who are most interesting, who have the most interesting stories, who do the most interesting things with their lives, those people are rarely people who have had easy lives. The people who are most interesting are people who have challenges. But when those challenges rise up, they deal with those challenges, and they just don't seem to give up. They respond to the challenge. Rather than the challenge crushing them, they rise to the challenge. And that seems to be what makes a person kind of interesting. And, sometimes it's what makes a person amazing. But I also think, in fact, I know that for many of us, we've had challenging times in the past. And for some of those challenges, we didn't find the ability to rise to that challenge. We didn't do as well in that challenge as we would like to. And that burdens us. Because sometimes we've done things we're afraid people are going to find out about. And if anyone ever finds out, what will I do? Or maybe people do know about the challenges in your life. And that sometimes makes it hard to hold your head up or hard to be comfortable around people. And if we're carrying things from our past that we're either afraid people are going to find out, or unable to move past the fact that people have already found out, that situation can leave us stuck. We can't really live our lives in a full way if that's what we're carrying. Now, as you recall, we're in a series now called Unstuck. And our focus in this series is about what are the things that hold us down, what are the things that cause us to feel stuck, and what can we do to get unstuck? Well, today I want to focus very specifically on getting free from the prison of our past. That we have those things in our lives that we're carrying with us, that we are either afraid people will find out or just ashamed because it's happened. Those things leave us stuck. And if we haven't been able to kind of come to grips with that, we are going to be trapped. And our past can become a prison. Even if the events themselves are long in our past, if we haven't dealt with those, if we haven't found a way to be free of what comes with that stuff, we're not going to be able to move on. So I'd like to go through that this morning, and I'd like to go through it using a very, very familiar story, maybe one of the most familiar stories of the New Testament, which is the woman at the well, an encounter Jesus has while traveling with a woman at a well. And like all the narratives we've gone through in this series, it comes from what we call the book of John. Right? The book of John, right, is simply John was a follower of Jesus, a close follower of Jesus, and he documented what he saw Jesus do in the time that John was with him. So because this is a familiar story, I kind of wanted to kick it off a little bit differently. You may be familiar with the TV show The Chosen, kind of the chronicles of the life of Jesus. There's a good clip that kind of goes through their making of the section about the woman at the well. Now, it was a little long, so I've edited it. And so all the rough edits are mine, the good edits are theirs, okay? So again, just kick this guy off real quick.
That's bad, huh?
What?
You, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan, and a woman.
A Jewish man and a Samaritan woman talking was very, very much against culture, both racially and gender-wise. This was at a time of day when there was no one else around. Normally the women would go together in the morning before it was too hot. She was there by herself. Because of her checkered past, she was disrespected in that town, and Jesus knew that.
Aren't I unclean to you? Won't you be defiled by this vessel?
The text tells us that Jews didn't have dealings with Samaritans.
Now why?
And there was a great enmity that existed between the two because the Samaritans believed that the Jews had corrupted the Torah. Jews believed that God had chosen David and his descendants to be the leaders of the people. The Samaritans thought they were the ones, and their descendants were called to be the leaders of the people, that the priesthood was meant to be the center.
Okay, so this is sounding, I'm going to stop you for a second there, because this is sounding like today.
Yeah.
I mean, even being here in Jerusalem, I'm seeing, looking over the city, literal divisions where this is where these people belong and this is where these people belong. So this was happening even back then.
Absolutely. Jews worship on Mount Moriah, on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The Samaritans said, no, it's on Mount Gerizim. That's where we're supposed to worship. They had all of these religious differences that led to this hostility that existed between them. And what I love about it is that Jesus, Yeshua, didn't allow any of this to stop him. In fact, I think he intentionally wanted to cross these racial barriers, these religious barriers, these gender barriers, to show that God is for everyone and that he is a uniter and not a divider.
Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews insist Jerusalem is the only place for true worship.
They say that because the temple is there.
Exactly where we're not allowed.
I'm here to break those barriers.
Jesus verbalized for the first time, I am the Messiah, I am he, were the words, to this woman that no one liked and no one wanted, who was by herself at a well.
This Messiah you speak of, I am he. I have not revealed myself to the public as the Messiah. You are the first.
God the Father in the Old Testament seemed to choose a lot of people who we wouldn't have normally expected. People who were not well-spoken, in the case of Moses, people who were not maybe strong kings. He oftentimes humbled the strong kings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like Jesus was carrying that tradition of choosing the people you'd least expect. What must the disciples have been thinking when they come back and Jesus is talking to a Samaritan female?
Yeah, they probably were not too happy. I mean, it would have been immodest for him to be alone talking to a woman in general. But I think the point of what he's trying to do is that he came to proclaim the good news of God's kingdom. And here's the good news, right? In the kingdom, there is no racism.
Right.
There is no division. There is no gender divide. There is no racial or ethnic divisions. That he came that we might become one new man, Jew and Gentile, man and woman in the Messiah. And if there is none of those things in heaven, and we're called to proclaim and bring the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven, those things can exist in our hearts, they can exist in our homes, and they can exist in our communities of faith.
The time is coming and is now here that it won't matter where you worship, but only that you do it in spirit and truth. Heart and mind, that is the kind of worshiper he's looking for. It won't matter where you're from or what you've done.
So that closing line, doesn't matter what you've done. That's the thing that I want us to take away from the story as we go through it. Because I know it's a familiar story, and if you've been in church for any length of time, you have heard this story more times than you can count. But the thing that I find so amazing is as I dig into these various narratives each week, and I kind of go through kind of different angles on them, and then we kind of link them up with different series, that there's so much new to see, so no matter how many times that you've seen it. And the thing that I really kind of grab on with this one is that if we're willing to kind of face our past and deal with our past, that's how we move past our past. This attempt to kind of just push it down and go, it's just not there, it's just not there, it's just not there. That's the thing that locks us up. So as we go through the narrative today, my hope is that each of us will maybe take some time as we go through it to kind of process maybe those things in our past that are hanging on to us and how we can kind of break free from that. So the narrative of the woman at the well, again, comes to us from the Apostle John. And this happens pretty early in the ministry of Jesus. And what's happening is that Jesus has been down in the area of Jerusalem. Remember, so you have the temple. Around that is the city of Jerusalem. And then outside of that is this region called Judea. And so Jesus is in the region of Judea. So he's around outside the city. And he's teaching. And things are going fantastic. People are believing in him. People are starting to follow him. People are actually expressing their faith through baptism. And all this is going really well. And as he's reaching a growing number of people, the Apostle John tells us that something else is going on. It said that Jesus knew the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than John the Baptist. So Jesus left Judea and returned to Galilee. Now, the key thing to take away there is that the religious leaders are getting upset because the religious leaders already didn't like John the Baptist because he was saying that we didn't have to go through this formal process to connect to God anymore, that relationship with God is personal. And so as he's doing that, John the Baptist was upsetting the Pharisees, and then this Jesus guy comes along, and he's doing even a better job of convincing people there's another way. And the religious leaders aren't happy about that. And they're not just a little bit unhappy. They're trying to figure out how to kill him. So he can't hang around. Now, if we think in our own lives, what's happening if something similar to that, maybe not someone's going to kill us, but the situation is you're doing something, it's going really, really well. And this opposition rises up, and you have to stop. And you have to move on. The temptation might be to say, things were so good. Why do I have to stop? Why do I have to move on? But that's not what Jesus did. Jesus, I would imagine, would prefer to stay there and see things going well. But he doesn't get hung up on stuff like that. The opposition means it's time to move on. It's time to go somewhere else. So, even though he's leaving because of opposition, it doesn't appear that Jesus sees this as a bad thing. He simply trusts that the work in that area that he can do for now is done. And I'll go to where I can do something else. And because of that, he ends up having an encounter at just the right place, at just the right time. And that's the woman at the well. Now, what's interesting is that John tells us very specifically about how Jesus is thinking of his journey. Because John tells us that Jesus had to go through Samaria on the way. So remember that he's moving from the area of Judea around Jerusalem, which is in the south. He wants to go to Galilee, where he spent most of his time, which is in the north. Samaria is between those two places. And John said he had to go through Samaria. Now remember that, as the video showed, the Jewish people and the Samaritan people do not get along. And there are far more Jewish people than Samaritan people. The Jewish people believe that the Samaritans have corrupted the faith, and they actually look down on them. And John says that Jesus had to go through Samaria to make that trip. Well, it was not a requirement of the journey to go through Samaria. There was actually a path between Galilee and Jerusalem that lots and lots of people traveled that went right around Samaria. It was a little bit longer, but you could go around Samaria. And that was the well-worn path, because all of the religious people, all the good people, made it a point to walk around Samaria. But Jesus said, I have to go through Samaria. And if you take the Greek word that's translated as had to, it means there was a pressing necessity. So the journey itself didn't require it, but Jesus' path, Jesus' purpose required it. Because Jesus understood that in order to reach people that no one else was reaching, he had to go where no one else was going. So the exact people that all the good people avoided, Jesus went directly to those people. And in doing that, he's reaching those that others don't reach. So as John tells us that Jesus and his disciples are on their journey, they get into the area of Samaria. It's getting to be part of the hotter part of the day. They've been walking for a long time. The disciples head off to get some food. And Jesus stays behind to take a break. And John tells us, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. So noontime, this is the Middle East, it means it's hot. And as Jesus is sitting there, the Samaritan woman comes to the well by herself. And there are a ton of things that tells us. We can know nothing else about her, but the simple fact that she is coming to the well by herself in the heat of the day tells us she's an outcast. Because culturally, the women's job was to get the water, but you did that either early in the morning or late in the day when it was cool. And you did it as a group, because that's where you catch up on the news of the day. That's where you catch up on each other's families. Maybe you catch up on the gossip while you're at it. And she's not part of that, which means she's not accepted. And we don't know if the other people pushed her out and she just has to go at a different time. But it seems more likely she just didn't want to put up with all the garbage she was going to get if she was out there with everyone else. So she chose to go out in the heat of the day so she could be left alone. But as she heads out there, putting up with the heat, just so I could be left alone, there's this guy sitting there where she has to go. And it's not just a guy, it's a Jewish guy. Right? And you know he's going to give me some crap. You know it. Right? So she needs water, though. So she goes to the well to get the water, just hoping, maybe he'll just leave me alone. I know he's thinking terrible things about me, but if he'll just shut his mouth, it'll be fine. Because she knows that this man looks down on her for every reason. He looks down on her because of her religion. He looks down on her because of her race. And the simple fact that she's female makes her less. That's exactly what she's expecting. But she needs water. So she goes there. But then, as she's at the well, the unthinkable happens. This guy asks her for water. And John goes on to tell us, the woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" You know, and I love the way the video characterizes it. She's not cowering, right? She's offended. You know, and that may be part of why she had so much trouble. Because she didn't back down in a culture where she's expected to back down. So it's one of those, you know, you look down on me, but you need something right now? So you're willing to engage with me in this situation? Now you'll talk to me? Now, of course, all of her reactions were based on what she expected to have happen. And she had good reason to expect that. She knows how she's been treated throughout her life. But it turns out that what she was expecting wasn't at all what Jesus was doing. In fact, as far as we can tell, Jesus knows her pain, knows she's hurt, knows that she doesn't feel good enough, and knows that these reactions, these vicious reactions, are an outcome of how she's been treated. And I think what he's doing for her is what he does for us. That seeing her in her pain, in her hurt, dealing with a life that has come about because of mistakes that she made, he doesn't pull away. It's those situations when he moves closest. And so he's there with her as she's dealing with her pain, as he wants to be with us as we deal with our pain. So as she responds to him in this kind of, hey, now you want something, you'll ask me about it, he says to her, if only you knew the gift God has for you. And again, I think he's saying to her what he wants to say to us. Then as he continues, if you only knew the gift God has for you and who you were speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water. Now, she's a bit confused at this point. If you had the ability to get water, you wouldn't be asking me for water. So why are you offering me water? And then Jesus explains. Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. In other words, anyone who drinks from the water in the well will become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. So that whole statement is reinforcing his opening statement of, if you only knew the gift God has for you. If you only knew the gift God has for you, you stop chasing down things that keep disappointing you. You'd stop chasing things that never live up to what you hoped they would be. You would understand that you've been created for a purpose, that God created you with a purpose. And you know what? There are good things in this life, and there are worthwhile things in this life. But if the only thing we pursue are the things in this life, ultimately we're going to feel unsatisfied. We're going to feel discontent. And that's something certainly that I know, in my own life, right? That there were times over the years where there was something that I just had to have. When I was young, it might have been a car, or, if I just lived there, my life would be okay. Instead of living here, my life would be better. But the old, everywhere I go, there I am sort of thing, right? And every time I try to leave, I keep bringing me with me, sort of thing. That we chase those things down. And we may have gone through great effort to do those things, thinking that this time it'll be enough. This time I'll feel satisfied. This time I'll stop feeling so down. This time I'll finally feel like I'm good enough. But it doesn't live up to expectations. Ultimately, in most cases, it mattered very little. I think that so often the things we look forward to, the things we work so hard to get, they don't live up to expectations. They don't provide the satisfaction we thought they would. Sometimes the things that we want most of all provide no satisfaction at all. And in fact, if we went one step further, if each of us kind of stepped back for a couple minutes, thought, and then decided to write down the biggest regret of our lives, each of us, the thing we wished we had done so differently, or maybe wished we'd never done at all. The reason we did what we did in the first place is because we didn't feel satisfied. We didn't feel good enough. Maybe we felt kind of empty. And we thought that thing, that if we just did that thing, if we just got that thing, or maybe if I could just be with that person, then I'd be okay. Then I'd be good enough. But then it didn't make a difference. In the end, it mattered very little at all. But now we have to carry that experience with us. And the point that Jesus is making as he's talking to this woman at the well is it doesn't have to be that way. That you were created for more. You're created to do not just important things. You were created to do lasting things. Things that stick. Things that matter. And Jesus is saying, follow me, and you will find a path that will take you there, that doesn't let you down. That you will find a path that enriches this life and leads to eternal life. Now, this is a really great thing Jesus is going through. This is what's meant by that phrase that he says about water. She doesn't get any of that because she just thinks he's talking about water. So she's like, wait a minute. I got to come out here all the time and deal with these people when I got to get water. You say you've got some water, I don't have to come out here anymore? That's all I needed to hear. I want some of that water. So then Jesus takes the conversation in a direction that seems odd to us, but would not have been unusual to her. Because as the conversation is getting more serious, even though she thinks we're just talking about water, he asks her a question. Or actually, I should say, he actually asks her to do something. He says, go get your husband. Now, to her, that would have seemed not abnormal, because in that culture, it's strange enough that a man is talking alone with a woman he doesn't know. But certainly, if we're going to talk about real business, the little lady can't handle that, right? We got to get the husband to deal with that. That's what her culture would have conditioned her to expect. So as he tells her to go get her husband, she admits that she doesn't have one. And that's a huge admission. Because again, because of the cultural norms of the time, a woman of her age without a husband, people would have thought there's something wrong with her. And she could have lied. She could have said that, oh, he's out working, or oh, he's out visiting a relative. But she doesn't lie. She says, I don't have one. Because Jesus had earned her trust, that she felt that she could be honest with him. And that honesty, that vulnerability, opened a door for her to move closer to Jesus. As the narrative continues, Jesus said, you're right. You don't have a husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth. On the surface, it sounds like he's condemning her. That's not what he's doing. In fact, it's kind of strange, right? He asks her a question, and when she answers, he goes, you're right. It was a question about her life. Of course she's right. She knows what she's been through in her life. But what was he doing? He's doing a couple things. One thing he's doing is said, I already know the answer. I already know what you've been through. And he commends her for her honesty. In other words, I know what you've been through, and you're willing to share it with me. You're willing to admit it to me. And as he reveals that he knows her past, and he's been so compassionate with her, he's saying, I don't condemn you for that. Be free of it. You don't have to carry that anymore. But then there's also another reason he asked the question. That of course it's important that she feel free from that burden. And of course it's important that she recognize that she's forgiven for the mistakes of her past. But there's something else really important that comes from that question. And we see it in her response. She says, Sir, you must be a prophet. In other words, I've spent my life hiding those details. Nobody knows all those details. People may know some, but nobody knows it all. So if you know all that, you must be from God. Jesus asked that question to reveal something about himself, that he was from God. And he wanted to give her evidence. I mean, he certainly could have said, hey, I'm Jesus and I'm from God. But why should she believe that? So he gave her evidence. The evidence was what he knew about her. So rather than just say, I've been sent by God, I'm going to show you I've been sent by God. And realizing that Jesus is from God, although she doesn't fully understand who he is, notice she calls him a prophet. She doesn't call him the Messiah. But she's like, well, you're from God. You must know religious stuff. I have a question. You know, the Jewish people believe one way, the Samaritan people believe another way. Why are they so different? And why does it create so much division between us? Because she's like, if you're from God, can you tell me the details? Why is it like that? And Jesus answers even better than that. He says, those details don't matter anymore. Jesus goes on to say, believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. But the time is coming, indeed it is here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. Jesus makes the point that the time has come where connecting with God is no longer tied to being in a specific physical place. Worship is about coming together in spirit and in truth, connecting with God spiritually and living in truth. The truth in the person and work of Jesus, what he's done and who he is, and the truth of putting our faith in Jesus. But then also living according to the truth of his command to love others as I have loved you. It's not about a place anymore. It's about spiritual connection with God and living with truth. As Jesus goes through this, he's revealing to her who he is and what he's come to do. And as that conversation continues, she comes to understand that he's not just a prophet, that he is the promised Messiah. And she comes to that conclusion because of evidence. He demonstrated to her that he is from God. And that gives her faith that Jesus is who he says he is. And the beautiful thing here is that once she has that realization, she doesn't go, whoa, I'm good. Woo, I'm out of here. She's like, I can't keep this to myself. Understanding what I now understand, seeing what I now see, I've got to go tell everyone. And what ends up happening is she does go tell everyone. And this woman, who because of her lifestyle had become an outcast to every other woman in the village, this woman who because of her gender had been considered less by every man she had ever met, and because of her race had been considered unclean by the majority race around her. This woman who had been looked down on by every person possible in every way possible became one of the first people to recognize who Jesus is and announce him as the Messiah. The narrative describes it like this. The woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah?" She has stopped hiding her past, and in that she finds freedom. Because she's forgiven, she's free. She doesn't have to be ashamed of it. And she walks in that joy. Her life had been a prison because of her past. But Once she got free of that, she admitted her mistakes to Jesus, just as we can admit our mistakes to God. And Jesus did not condemn her for her mistakes. He simply asked her to be honest about her past, be honest about what she had done. And then she surrendered her past. She surrendered her guilt to Jesus. And he didn't receive her with condemnation. He received her with love. No condemnation. He received her with love. She looked at the evidence of who Jesus is. She put her faith in Jesus, and she became free. And here's I love this. The past that held her down became her platform. It gave her an ability to speak like no one else could speak in a way that no one else could speak. That past that had held her down so much, had been transformed into a platform and a voice that was uniquely hers because of what she'd been through. And she lived in the freedom that she found. And the thing that I kind of want each of us to take with this as I wrap up, you and I have that exact same opportunity. You do not have to be imprisoned by your past. Not at all. If we'll face our past and surrender it to God, we do find freedom. Remember that it's those challenges we go through, it's those mistakes. They're the things that make us interesting. Right? They're what make us unique. Your past, whatever is in it, gives you a unique perspective. You see the world in a way that no one else sees exactly like you. And there are things that only you can do the way you'll do them. Because whatever you've had to work through, you understand the pain of other people who are working through exactly what you had to work through. No one else can understand things in certain scenarios that they haven't been through. I mean, why does Alcoholics Anonymous work? Because an alcoholic and someone who's gotten through knows what it's like to be in it. Whatever the pains of our past are, we've got to work through them. And if you've gotten to the other side, you can do what others who have not been through it can do. My friends, once you find freedom from your past, embrace your past. There is no need to hide it. Look for those opportunities that you are uniquely qualified to deal with and be willing to step into them. There's a line from the movie Dumbo. The thing that once held you down will lift you up. Let's embrace our past. Let's get free of it by connecting with God, being open and honest, trusting Him to be with you, and then step in to the work before you to do the things that only you can do the way you'll do them.